Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the 2025 American Express Tournament. This is our all-in-one preview. So we are going to break down the course. We are going to look at the key statistics for this course, and then we're going to look at the golfers and tell you who we like for all different formats of games this week, whether you are betting outright, whether you are looking for position bets, whether you're playing DFS, whether you're playing one and done. We've got you covered with all the information we're going to talk here in this video or audio episode if you're listening on audio, that is going to help you find winners for the American Express tournament. Now, I know this tournament has its share of detractors. There's a lot of people that don't like this tournament. It is quite quirky. It is quite different. But one thing that it does tend to do is it does tend to produce a good finish year in and year out. I think the closing stretch of this tournament generally creates pretty thrilling golf. And I think that it generally, I found myself, it's normally on divisional playoff weekend in the NFL, and it normally kind of comes during a lull, like either in between games or like after the second game, or you can generally put it on when there's not high leverage football on. And so it is a final round of golf that, even though we're kind of still in football season, I do end up still watching on a Sunday afternoon. So hopefully that little bit of extra knowledge here for this tournament is going to help you guys find some winners here this week. Now, if you have not already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. That way you can be with us for the rest of the PGA Tour season, as well as all of our college basketball content that is going on right now as well. But that's going to do it for the introduction, y'all. I always set like a self-imposed time limit of 30 minutes or less for these golf previews, and we just did a minute and a half of the intro. So let's go ahead and dive into the course itself for the American Express. All right, so part of what makes the American Express a unique tournament is the fact that we are at the start of course rotation season. This is a tournament that it is a pro-am with like not really anybody famous, but because of the pro-am format, it gets played at 3 courses Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then the cut gets made after Saturday's round. And then the final round is played at the Pete Dye Stadium course. So on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, all golfers will play one round at La Quinta Country Club, the Nicklaus Tournament course, and the Pete Dye Stadium course. And then on Sunday, all the golfers that make it through the cut will play the Pete Dye Stadium course one more time. Shot length does not get set up at the other 2 courses, the Nicklaus Tournament course and La Quinta Country Club. So there's very little like video footage or very little statistics that we have to go by for those courses other than like the raw scores. And so there's really not that much of a need to talk about them, honestly. What I've found generally is that those 2 courses are just like your cookie cutter birdie fest PGA Tour courses. Like they're quite easy. Adam had one a few years back, like shot 59 on one of them, and like they didn't have cameras out there, and they had to scramble and find cameras to go put out there and watch Adam had one. But they're just quite easy. And if you're playing Showdown DFS, or if you're doing any like round by round betting or like underdog drafts or something like that, you're going to want to target the guys who are on the La Quinta Country Club or the Nicklaus Tournament course, because those are going to be significantly easier than the Pete Dye Stadium course, even though the Pete Dye Stadium course is not that difficult all in its own right. I will say, though, that pretty much every piece of content this week is giving that same advice to target the La Quinta Country Club and the Nicklaus Tournament course for one round or, Showdown DFS. And so, a whole lot of sharp people are going to be doing that as well. Just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and talk about the Pete Dye Stadium course. So this is the course where a few years back, Jon Rahm notoriously dubbed it as a piece of effing expletive putting contest, right? So basically, this tournament gets dubbed as a putting contest because it is so easy, but it is really not a putting contest. Jon Rahm won this tournament in 2023, losing 4 strokes putting just in rounds on the Pete Dye Stadium course. This is a type of setup where, to me, it is an approach contest, not a putting contest. When you look at this course, like on a flyover or GPS, or, you play it on the EA Sports video game, this would be quite difficult for the scratch golfer this course would. There is a lot of bunkers. There is a lot of water. But for the pros who can mash the ball 300 yards off the tee and carry a lot of hazards, and who are super dialed in on their approach shots, you can really miss a lot of the hazards and take the difficulty out of this course. For about a 20-year stretch when this course was, first invented, it was dubbed as being too hard for the pros. The pros hated playing here because it was so difficult. But as modern technology has evolved, this has become a super easy golf course. Not as easy as La Quinta or the Nicklaus Tournament course, but still super easy. There are very minimal hazards off the tee for the PGA Tour guys. Like, as long as you keep the ball on the planet, the rough is almost non-existent, and the bunkers are more so like further up the holes than, where a lot of these guys are going to be hitting to. So really, the off the tee play is not going to be all that important this week at all. You can be wayward with your driver, and as long as you're just keeping the ball on the planet, you're going to be okay. But to me, approach is where this tournament is won and lost. The greens themselves are not like super big, not super small. The flags can be put in precarious positions, but because of the format of a Pro-Am, it generally does not get put in that position. So what you see is the guys who can stick it the closest, just every single hole and give themselves the most look at birdies are going to be the ones that end up cashing in. Like that's the number one thing I'm looking for this week is approach. Now, the greens themselves, there's two things that are kind of quirky about them this week. First, they were dug up and replaced as soon as this tournament finished last year. So with it being brand new greens, they're going to be a little firmer, a little faster than they normally are. That's just how grass works. Like you haven't had the wear and tear of thousands of golf balls hitting them year after year after year. So they're going to be a little bit firmer. They're going to be a little harder to hold. So to me, that's just going to place an extra emphasis on approach play. And then also they are a surface where this course is usually Bermuda grass, but this time of year, Bermuda grass is still dormant. So what they do is they overseed it with POA grass. And so you end up with the agronomy that is very much like TBC Sawgrass, TBC Scottsdale, Harbor Town, and I believe the Valspar Championship do this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this generally creates a very thrilling finish because holes 16 and 17, 18 are very much like the sister course for this Pete Dye Stadium course. This course was very much made to look like the TBC Sawgrass, out in Florida. And so 16, you have a risk reward par 5, just like at Sawgrass. 17 is a peninsular par 3 with rocks all around it. And then 18 is a par 4 with water all down the left side. So you do generally get a thrilling finish here. We have the last 2 years where Jon Rahm had to make a long putt to outduel Davis Thompson 2 years ago. And then last year you had Nick Dunlap stealing the tournament away from Sam Burns, or some would say Sam Burns choking away the tournament. So the key stats this week for the Pete Dye Stadium course. Number one is going to be strokes gained approach. Are you a good approach player? This is where the tournament is going to be won or lost this week. It is going to be the number one statistic that I am going to be factoring in is approach in all different ways. And two of those ways are going to be opportunities gained and opportunities plus gained. So the opportunity stat is basically, hey, did you give yourself a 15-foot or less birdie putt on this hole? And how were you doing it relative to the field? So it doesn't care whether the course is easy or hard. It cares how you are measuring up relative to the field. Because if you give yourself the most birdie putts, yes, Jon Rahm dubbed it as a putting contest, but it's a lot easier to putt from 10 feet than it is to putt from 30 feet. So that is why the approach stats are supreme here on this one. And with this course being a birdie fest, with there being 4 par 5s as a full par 72, I am looking at birdie or better gained. I am looking at par 5 scoring this week. Now, my comp courses, we already mentioned one. It is TPC Sawgrass. TPC Scottsdale is kind of similar. You do have the Bermuda with the POA overseed. You do have similar corridors off the tee where the goal is just to keep it on the planet. And then you've got TPC Twin Cities as another comp that is another like high risk, high reward course, in my opinion. Here at the Pete Dye Stadium course, there are not a whole lot of middle irons. There are a lot of short par 4s that produce wedge shots, and then the long irons are going to be used on the par 5 to try to go for the green in 2. TBC Twin Cities is very much a similar setup. I think TBC River Highlands is kind of a similar setup like that as well. And then TBC Summerlin is a Vegas course that does tend to be a birdie fest. So that makes the list of my comp courses as well. So that does it for the course itself. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to dive down the rabbit hole. All right, so if you've been with us for a while, you know that when I mentioned the rabbit hole, I'm not referring to an actual rabbit hole. I'm referring to the tool from BetSperts Golf called the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole. That was really difficult to say. That has all different data and ways to condition and filter your data so that way you can really isolate the micro skills that you want to target for each individual golf course. And it allows you to make a custom model so you can see who the best golfers that fit the skill set that you draw out are. So this week I kind of went pretty simple. As we were talking about, approach play is going to be the name of the game this week. So I wanted to feature a lot of approach stats and a lot of easy scoring stats as well. So the first thing that I looked at in terms of making my custom model for this week is just general strokes gained approach in the calendar year 2024. The 5 best golfers in the field in that category: Tom Hoge, Tony Finau, Lucas Glover, Doug Yim, and Justin Thomas. Now, I also wanted to do overall proximity because the rabbit hole does not have opportunities and opportunities plus. But what I did want to look at is, hey, are you putting the golf ball close to the hole? Because if you are, then you're going to give yourself plenty of birdie opportunities here on this one, right? And so number one in that category in the last year, Joel Damon, Lucas Glover, Chan Kim, Will Gordon, and then Daniel Berger rounding out the top 5. I then wanted to look at birdie or better in easy scoring conditions to know who's going out there and getting the birdies when they need to get the birdies. Top 5 for that category. We got Michael Thorbjornsen, Patrick Cantlay, Harry Hall, Tony Finau, and Sam Burns. I then wanted to look at par 5 average because scoring on these par 5s is going to be important. Number 1 in that category is Rico Hoey, followed by Max Grazerman, Patrick Fishburne, Jonathan Vegas, and Harry Hall. Side note, Patrick Fishburne, I always get confused with Jacob Bridgman. I don't know why, but I feel like they're rookies that came on the PGA Tour together, have similar skill sets, are always in contention, never winning. Then I wanted to look at just putting, but I only wanted to use courses that do the Bermuda with the POA overseed like we were talking about in the course preview. So just when you look at those specific courses, the best guys in terms of strokes gained putting in top 5 are Patrick Rogers, Sam Ryder, Ben Griffin, Sam Burns, and Brian Harmon. And then when you look at all the comp courses that we listed out, including the Pete Dye Stadium course, because again, I'm not doing like a big thing on the Pete Dye Stadium course because they're only playing 2 rounds there this week. It'd be foolish to put that as a huge part of the model when that's not going to be like all 4 rounds, right? So I used that in the list of comp courses with the ones that we had in the key stats slide. And the top 10 at comp courses are Sung J M, Tony Finau, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Brian Harmon, Tom Kim, JT Poston, Tom Hoagie, Sam Burns, and Adam Hadwin, with Matty Schmid tying Adam Hadwin for 10th. All right, now when you throw all that into a model, keep in mind we've already gotten the news this week of Xander Schauffele withdrawing. It would not shock me to see anybody else withdraw, just, that's kind of the type of tournament it is. And with Xander withdrawing, I was pretty confident that Xander was going to come out as number 1 in this model, but it's not. It's Tony Finau, who is a guy that I traditionally don't necessarily think of as a great fit at this type of course. But when you do look at his history here, he plays here pretty much every year. In the last 4 years, he's never finished worse than 40th. He's got a T16, a T40. I'm sorry, he's played here the last 5 years and never finished worse than 40th. He's got a T25, T16, T40, a 4th, and a T14. So that bodes pretty well for old Finau, even though this gets labeled as a putting contest. This is actually a pretty good putting surface for him. He ranks 49th in the field on this surface in putting, which is much better than any other surface when it comes to Tony Finau. Now, keep in mind, he is also bouncing back off of an injury, so we don't know if we're going to get the same 100% Tony Finau. If we do, he is a perfect course fit for this, in my opinion. Number 2 is Tom Hoagie. He's the approach king, right? Like, he's the number 1 player in approach. He's going to rank well in every approach stat. He also tends to play these Pro-Am events quite well. He's won the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. So I do think that there's something to be said for that, and maybe it's definitely worth looking into Hoagie this week. Number 3 is a guy who played really well here last year, Justin Thomas. Now, Justin Thomas was a big-time disappointment at Kapalua. A lot of people were on him, and he finished 26th. At this event last year, he did come in 3rd place, which is pretty good. It's what you want to see, right? So not shocked to see Justin Thomas come in 3rd. Kurt Kitayama coming in 4th was a little bit of a surprise to me. The approach metrics rank out really well for him. The putting does not. The comp courses pretty well also. This is generally not what you think of when you think of a Kurt Kitayama course. Like, his wins have come at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, a difficult track, right? The other place he's played well in the past would be like the Scottish Open, which is another difficult track. He's only played here one time. He has missed the cut. So it's not necessarily like the best spot for Kitayama, but hey, the metrics rank out really well. After Kurt Kitayama, we've got Patrick Cantlay coming in number 5. No surprise there. I feel like Cantlay is a great pick here, even though his approach play was really not good in the calendar year 2024. He's really good at easy courses, really good at birdie fests. He's really good at Pro-Ams because, Pro-Ams, we tend to get much longer rounds with them playing in foursomes with the amateurs. And who's used to playing long rounds? Patrick Cantlay, the king of slow play himself. So Patrick Cantlay coming in at number 5, being a guy who plays well at this type of event, not a shocker at all. Daniel Berger's number 6. Now, I'm very conflicted. I was all over Daniel Berger last week at the Sony Open, and it just didn't work out at all because he missed the cut, right? We thought we were going to be getting the Daniel Berger from the fall swing. We did not. We got the Daniel Berger who missed the cut. Really, really disappointing. Here at this event, obviously he didn't play it for a few years because of his injury, but in the last 3 times he's played it, he hasn't finished worse or outside the top 40, I should say. So definitely Daniel Berger might be somebody who is worth looking at here this week. After Berger at 6, we've got Jonathan Vegas, number 7, guy that won at a very similar layout at TPC Twin Cities last year, guy who mashes it off the tee and is a pretty good approach player. I like the idea of playing Jonathan Vegas this week. Ben Griffin, number 8, this is not what I would think of as a Ben Griffin track, but like Ben Griffin's weakness is his driver. And so when you're not placing a huge level of importance on the driver, this is a course that he's probably going to pop up well at. Like really, like it'd be like an NFL team, that can't throw the ball, and they're playing a team where you can really, really run on them. Like it just shapes up well that they're going to play well, right? Now he did play here last year and finished in 9th place. Very good fall swing for Ben Griffin last week at the Sony, only 45th, but definitely worth a look there as 8th in my model. Keith Mitchell is 9th. Not really a whole lot of thoughts there. He's generally a guy that I fade in DFS formats because he never really wins. He's a god-awful putter. He's awful at putting on these surfaces, but the approach numbers are really, really good. And then Sam Burns rounding out the top 10. The approach numbers for Sam Burns are not that good, but he's been great at the comp courses. He's great at putting on this surface. He's great in easy conditions as well. So Sam Burns, definitely a guy worth looking into. So anyway, that is just the first run through of my model. Far from the last, because what I generally do is I generally run a model again on Wednesday. And if you would like to see that model along with my DFS core for the week, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks. Every single week I post an article where I have the DFS core as well as the final top 10 from the model. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description below. If you're looking for a community of people to talk DFS with, specifically golf DFS, you should check it out. There's just a lot of activity in there for all kinds of sports, a whole lot of really good, really smart people talking DFS. It is very much more DFS oriented though, as opposed to like outright betting or one and done or anything like that. And then also follow me on Twitter. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you reach out to me. Also tweet out all updates for the show as well. So that's just a great way to stay informed. All right. So we're done with the rabbit hole. We're done with the course. Now let's take a look at the board and let's talk about how we can play some of these golfers this week. All right. So looking at the board, the thing you have to remember, especially when you're playing DFS on DraftKings this week, is the impact of the Xander Schauffele withdrawal. So basically, Xander Schauffele was like in a category of his own, up priced above 11K on DraftKings. And really in the betting market, he was at a price of his own as well. So what it did was really, when you have like a leader of the pack, and that leader of the pack is gone, it kind of brings the whole rest of the pack up. And so what I really think you're going to see in DFS formats this week is I think you're going to see pretty flat ownership across like the top of the board, but I think they're all going to be quite popular. And then when I think you're thinking of a betting market, like I see a lot of people that are going to end up near the same number because the books aren't going to know what to do with them. And it's just going to be easiest just to try to pick your guy if you're looking to bet one of the favorites. All right, so we've already talked about Justin Thomas. Let's talk about Sungjae Im. He is not one of my favorite plays this week. Yes, he's coming off of a great week at the Century. Yes, he always plays this tournament, has not finished outside the top 25 in the last 6 appearances. But what were we saying was the key this week in the name of the game? That is strokes gained approach. Of the guys near the top, he is one of the worst strokes gained approach players out there. And if you look at what he did at the Century, he was pretty much neutral on approach. He was gaining all of his strokes off the tee and with the putter. That is not necessarily what we want. He also lost strokes on approach at the Zozo Championship as well, which was his last event played in the fall swing. That's not what we want to see. So I very much think that's a red flag around Sungjae. We talk about all those guys near the top that popped up near the top of my model. He was not one of them. And so Sungjae is not going to be a guy that I'm probably going to be playing this week just for that reason. I would much rather play the guys that did pop in my model, like a Justin Thomas, like a Tony Finau, who rate really well on approach, or like a Sam Burns or like a Patrick Cantlay, who have great history at this event or great history at this type of event. And also, all of them like pretty much play well at the Century. Like Justin Thomas, of all the top of the board, Justin Thomas was like the worst one at the Century in 26th place. Everybody else was a top 15. So everybody, you could argue is coming in off of good recent form. And you can also look at the matrix and see that everybody near the top of the board has, a good finish at this event in the past. We mentioned Justin Thomas's T3, Sam Burns's T6 last year, where he arguably should have won. Patrick Cantlay was runner up here once. Tony Finau was 4th here once. Wyndham Clark owns 2 top 15s here as well. Tom Kim is an interesting case. So Tom Kim, generally great approach player, guy I was all over last summer, and he never did win for me. I did have an outright bet on him at the Travelers in which he made it to the playoff against Scotty, and I instantly cashed out because I knew he had no chance. But this is generally a pretty good approach player who has not been great in the other aspects of his game. Like at the Sony Open, he was great on approach. Everything else was bad. Like everything else was real bad. Then maybe that might cut it this week, but it's not going to be enough for a win unless he can get something else figured out. So that very much worries me. He's played this event 3 times and he's placed 6th once and missed the cut the other 2 times. That's another red flag. So Tom Kim is probably going to be a guy who, even though he does rank out really well as an approach player, is probably not going to be in my player pool this week. Now, I do think that after Tom Kim, I think there's a major fall off. I think when you're making DFS lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel this week, I think you're going to want to get 2 guys, Tom Kim or higher, in your lineup. There's plenty of value out there. There's plenty of ways to build your lineup. I'm not seeing a need to really go below Tom Kim for the second guy in, unless you want to make a balanced build type of thing. But like looking at this field, I think there's a talent gap for like right after Tom Kim. I really do. And I think that you're going to want to make sure you get somebody or 2 guys that are at Tom Kim or above. Because after Tom Kim, you got Max Grazerman, who's been playing good golf, but like it's all been with the putter, which is kind of a red flag. Last year, he did play this event and come in 56th place, which is not terrible, but it's not going to cut it for what we want for a guy priced $9,200 on DraftKings. Siwoo Kim has won this event before, but I will caution you, when Siwoo won it, it was the COVID year, so there was no pro-am, there was no crowd. And what they did was they played 3 rounds at the Pete Dye Stadium course, and Siwoo Kim is a guy who shines at Pete Dye golf courses. So it just really allowed him to like accentuate his skill set, play where he was comfortable, and win that event. We mentioned how we're prioritizing approach this week. Well, that would kind of X out Cameron Young and Davis Thompson, who in the last 6 months have lost strokes on approach. That's kind of a red flag. Harry Hall is not a guy that popped up in our custom model, but he is a guy who I actually really, really do like this week. I think he's massively overpriced on DraftKings, but I like him, so it makes me very conflicted. In fact, I think he's overpriced in the outright market as well, because I think people are starting to like this guy because of what he's done recently. He was T8 at the Century, T10 at the Sony Open, and that was followed up from like a really, really good fall swing. Like he was just great in the entire fall swing, right? That really makes him very attractive, even though the Sony Open, the last round that he had really, really did kind of move his stats down a little bit, especially in the ball striking categories. He had a very poor final round, but before that, he was doing really well on approach. And this is a guy who usually does find it with the putter. So I do think this is a really good spot for Harry Hall. He is a guy who I'm going to be on this week. And his history at this event, though, has not been great. He's played here 3 times, missed the cut missed the cut once. Other 2 have been 41st and 47th. We already mentioned how we liked Kurt Kitayama. JJ Spawn is an interesting one. JJ Spawn led the field last week at the Sony Open in strokes gained on approach. You got to like that, right? But he's priced way up there. Like it just makes it really tough in DraftKings. I do think he's a very logical like outright bet or like a top 20 bet even, but it's really hard in DraftKings when you look at the guys he's priced around to argue to play JJ Spawn. Nick Dunlap won this event last year. I really do like Nick Dunlap. He is coming in off of the Sony, where he came in 10th place, and he's the defending champ. And, if you win this event once, you can probably win it again. He's generally not a great driver of the golf ball, but he's a pretty good approach player. Nick Dunlap I like a lot. Will Zalatoris, I just think this is not the event for him. I just don't. Like Will Zalatoris is at his best in difficult conditions at major championships, long, difficult golf courses. This is not that. So I'm probably going to be fading old Willie Z this week as much as I like him. Eric Cole is an interesting case. He came in 5th last week at the Sony Open. He actually was 5th in that field in strokes gained on approach. He's played here twice, 36th and 21st. I think he's in pretty good shape to be a pretty popular play on DraftKings this week. I think Brian Harman is going to be quite popular on DraftKings this week as well. People like to play Brian Harman at shorter golf courses, and the history backs that up. He plays here every year. He's got 2 third-place finishes in the last 8 years. That's pretty solid for Brian Harman. Patrick Fishburne's at 8,100. We talked about him a little bit already. Now that we're down in the value play range, let's just talk about guys we like. And one thing that I like to do for this is, if a guy didn't show up on my model, I want to look for like supreme approach play or like supreme course history, right? And so we've already talked about Tom Hoagie. We've already talked about Ben Griffin. We've already talked about Jonathan Vegas. Let's go ahead and talk real quick about Adam Hadwin, because if anybody was the king of course history here at this event, it is Adam Hadwin. He plays here every year, hasn't finished outside the top 32 since 2016. Over that span, he's got 5 top 6 finishes. He just seems to always play well here every week. He's only $7,700. Whoops, hit the wrong button on my computer here. To me, that makes him a very attractive play on DraftKings, and a lot of people are going to be opting for him as their play in the 7K range. So as a pivot play, might I offer up Beau Hossler? Doesn't have overwhelmingly good course history, doesn't have overwhelmingly good recent form or numbers for that matter. But you talk about a guy who can get red hot and give you like a few really good rounds. Beau Hossler is that type of guy. And I feel like at an easy track like this, playing the best golf of his career, I think this is a pretty good spot for Beau Hossler. I also think this is a really good spot for Sepp Straka. So he was really disappointing for me at the Sony. He was a core play. But when you look at the numbers at the end of the day at that event, he was top 10 in the field that week in approach, gaining over a stroke per round. He gained almost a stroke per round at the Century, over a stroke per round at the RSM Classic. Like, his approach play has been really dialed in, and he's pretty good at putting on these overseeded greens. So Sepp Straka is going to be one of my favorite plays in the 7K range right there at 7,600. Christian Bezuidenhout was the runner-up here last year. Lee Hodges is another interesting name. So he has a win at TBC Twin Cities, which we liked as a comp course. He was 10th at the Sony Open, had a pretty good fall swing. Has played here 3 times, missed the cut twice, but was T3 in 2022. I believe that was the year that Hudson Swafford won it. So Lee Hodges, worth a look to me. And his best categories are his ball striking categories. When you look at strokes gained, I think he's worth a look. I do. So Lee Hodges, 7,500, going to be a guy that makes my player pool. Now, after that, again, if you're just looking for big-time approach numbers, you've got Mac Meisner. You've got Doug Gim. Those are 2 guys that can really get the job done on approach, as well as Lucas Glover. Andrew Putnam is one that really, really does get it done on approach. You can see with the numbers, his worst category in terms of strokes gained is off the tee. And like we've talked about, like all show long, off the tee play is kind of mitigated here. So this is a really good spot for Putnam where he can use that iron game. His history here is pretty darn good. He has not missed a cut here, has finished 47th or better every time, without a finish better than 10th though. So maybe this is the year that he can finally break through now that his iron game is really dialed in. Now, in terms of like supreme value plays, Jackson Suber, I think, is worth a look at $7,000. He is a young guy who is up and coming, finished 6th at the Sony Open, and he was 4th in the Sony Open in strokes gained on approach. So the guy can really dial it in on approach. He, in my opinion, is very much worth a look. Obviously, he doesn't have any event history to speak of because he is a young guy, but I'm kind of willing to buy into him just based off of the approach play alone. After that, Rico Hoey is a guy that just makes a ton of birdies, made the cut at the Sony Open and kind of faded over the weekend. Played here last year and missed the cut. But I think he's a guy that just goes out and makes a lot of birdies, and he's a guy that's worth a look at $7,000. Matty Schmid popped up for the comp courses quite big, even though he did miss the cut at the Sony Open last week. That's not what we like to see. But, if a guy is going to pop up well at the comp courses, that's what we like to see. And then I'm also going to continue shouting out Justin Lauer. He's a guy that, I think eventually he's going to break through because he's a really, really good putter of the golf ball, right? And he tends to have pretty good approach numbers. Not always, but tends to. Like he kind of flips the switch on whether it's really good or really bad. And if it goes really good, he generally gives himself a chance to win the golf tournament because of how good of a putter he is. So Justin Lauer is going to be another guy that I'm kind of going to roll with there in the 6K range. Oops, I went to the wrong tab. Hold on. There we go. Now, other guys that are going to be in the 6K range, his approach numbers are awful, but Chandler Phillips is a guy that plays well, easy courses, very good at birdie fests. Sam Ryder popped up really good on the overseeded greens as a putter, 21st at the Sony. His history here, he's got a 5th place finish, but oh no, I'm sorry, that is not for this event. Not good history here for Sam Ryder, so maybe scratch that one. Emiliano Grillo is a guy that is in terms of talent, is way down on the list from where he should be, but the recent form hasn't been good. The course history hasn't been good, but he's a guy that we know is talented, and he tends to win at easier golf courses. Carson Young is a guy that will certainly keep it in the planet off the tee. He's a pretty accurate driver of the golf ball. Was cut at the Sony Open. here last year came in 17th place. Maybe he's worth a look at 6,700. But after that, like, it's really hard to talk yourself into like some of these lower 6K guys, unless you want to just literally hit strokes gained approach and sort. If you want to just look at ball striking in this range, in terms of like the non DP World Tour, non Corn Ferry Tour guys, Nick Hardy rates out really well. He is coming off of a miscut at the Sony. He's played this event one time and finished in 67th place. All right, so last thing we will talk about is a one and done play for this week. So I'm not going to show you guys the goods and show you my official one and done play, because a lot of people that watch this are playing against me in our official one and done contest. So last week we went with Keegan Bradley as our official pick and ended up pretty solid, right? This is not a signature event, so this is not a like big time payday and one and done. So I do not feel the need to try to rush to play Justin Thomas or Sung JM or Sam Burns or Patrick Cantlay or Tony Finau. I feel like down the road, you might want them at a signature event. But if you want to be of the mindset of, hey, I'm going to be super aggressive, I'm going to get out in front of everybody, and I'm going to play this one and done from ahead, I totally understand the concept of playing one of those guys. When you look at leaderboards here for this event, there tends to be like long shot winners, like Nick Dunlap. But there's also tends to be favorites who play well right behind them, like Justin Thomas, like Sam Burns, like John Rahm 2 years ago. And John Rahm, I feel like, was pretty good here 3 years ago as well. So like, you really just want to try to find the right guy if you're doing that, or just pick a guy from the mid-range that just you don't think you're going to need again, don't think you're going to use again, that's going to be a pretty good course fit. Like, I would argue that Siwoo Kim is a pretty good course fit, unless you're going to use him at like the Wyndham Championship or Harbour Town. Like, there's no real need to save him. I think that this week Harry Hall makes a really, really reasonable pick, because the only saving grace with Harry Hall is like he plays a ton of events in total jabroni fields. So you may get a week where Harry Hall's betting odds are much better than they are this week, but he's coming in great form. He's got a great course fit here. Definitely think Harry Hall 8,800 on DraftKings is definitely an appealing one and done play. And, we already mentioned my model loved Kurt Kitayama. Nick Dunlap is the defending champ. So if you want to go with that angle, you can. And then I would never fault you for going with Eric Cole or Brian Harmon at a course like this. Or, Jason Day and Tom Hoagie, two guys have had success at this course, have success at this type of event, or the course history king, Adam Hadwin. But like I said, if you want to be aggressive and get ahead of your one and done this week, you can go with one of the guys at the top. If you made me pick one, gun to my head, I would probably go JT. But I also think this is a week with it not being a signature event, with there being a ton of weeks left on the schedule, that you can just pick your guy, hope to get a top 10, maybe you get a win, and then go on for the rest of the season. But all right, y'all, that's going to do it here for this episode. Missed my cutoff a little bit this week. Probably talked about too many guys when looking at the board, but it's okay. But that's going to do it. Hopefully we gave you guys plenty of good information that you can use to win, whether you are playing DFS, whether you are making some kind of outright betting, player props, underdog, whatever you're doing this week. Hopefully we gave you guys the information you need to find some winners here at the American Express. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I cannot stress that enough how much I appreciate it. But other than that, that's going to end this episode, y'all. So we will be back next week for the Farmers Insurance Open, which has a Wednesday start, keep in mind. So just make sure you're aware of that. But yeah, we'll be back for that next week. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.